Hey Ryan, what's on your radar this morning?
So we talk a lot on this program about trust, about how trust in major institutions has been on a steady decline for decades, a collapse that accelerated after the 2008 financial crisis and the failed response to it. One consequence of that mistrust in major institutions has been a reluctance to take the word of public officials on the safety of the vaccines that have been produced to combat the coronavirus. On the one hand, I do think that some in the media have been too glib about people's real concerns with those vaccines. They were approved under emergency circumstances, and obviously it's impossible to have studied the long-term implications or complications because they're brand new. But on the other hand, COVID is brand new too. We called it the novel coronavirus for a reason. And we do know so far that for most people, catching COVID comes with way more risk than getting the vaccine. And even if the vaccine doesn't prevent all breakthrough cases, what we're finding is that if you catch COVID after getting vaccinated, you're almost guaranteed of not getting a serious case. We're probably never getting rid of COVID entirely. In fact, we never got rid of the Spanish flu that rocked the world in 1919 and 1920. It's still around, but it mutated into a much less deadly pathogen. If enough of the world can get vaccinated, that's a best-case scenario, perhaps. Just like with the flu, some people will still catch it, but almost everybody will get over it pretty quickly. The personal calculation isn't the only one to make, though. If you're fairly young and unvaccinated, chances are very good you'll survive COVID, especially as treatment has improved. But chances are also very good, almost guaranteed, that you'll infect at least one person you come into contact with. Do you know how that person will fare? What about the person they infect? Do you want that on your conscience? Speaking of good conscience, Fox News has been the most aggressive cable network in stoking fears about the vaccines. Most of the hosts have publicly said they've been vaccinated, and some have suggested to viewers they do the same, but the balance of their coverage has been clear. Here's one recent clip.
But the Delta variant really is not responsive at all or protected at all by the vaccines. So 42% of 90,000 proven Delta cases in the UK have been vaccinated. And in Israel, they estimate right now from the Israel health authorities that the vaccine efficacy rate is only about 60 to 70%. So we expect Delta cases in fully vaccinated individuals. It'll be a mild rise. It's easily treatable in high-risk patients. There's no reason right now, no clinical reason to go get vaccinated.
I mean, first of all, why do they have a cardiologist on there talking about epidemiology? And that part where he said the vaccine is totally ineffective against the Delta variant? That's just factually untrue. He then says it's about 60% effective, which is pretty good for a vaccine. And then next, he says there's no clinical reason to get vaccinated, even though he just told you one of the clinical reasons to get vaccinated. Yet Fox itself has a very different attitude. A Fox worker sent me a note they got recently from their HR department, and it reads, "Thank you for providing Fox with your vaccination information. You no longer are required to complete your daily screening through Work Care Work Matters. However, please continue to monitor your health and stay home if you experience any of the symptoms. Please keep this email and image stored in a safe place where you will be able to access it easily. You will be asked to provide it upon entering Fox work locations." So I reached out to Fox News and they declined to comment on the record. What I can tell you is that this is part of a system that gives workers what's called a Fox Clear Pass. As of June 22nd, according to a memo Fox HR sent out, workers aren't required to get vaccinated, but if they're not vaccinated, they have to mask up and practice social distancing on the job site. If they do get vaccinated and plug their information into the system, they get a Fox Clear Pass. I wonder what Tucker Carlson would think about a system like that.
Just this morning, the New York Times informed us that unless you can prove you have taken the injection that the Democratic Party demands you take, you are no longer permitted in bars, comedy clubs, even some dance competitions in the state of New York. You're too dirty to appear in public. You're not welcome near normal people. Want to watch the NBA playoffs in person? You had better be vaccinated to do that. Otherwise, the New York Knicks will bar you from Madison Square Garden. You can still go see a baseball game if you want to, but be warned, you will be sitting in your own roped-off section, marinating in your shame with the other disobedient bad people. Medical Jim Crow has come to America. If we still had water fountains, the unvaccinated would have separate ones.
Later in that monologue, Tucker says it's illogical to require unvaccinated people to be distanced from vaccinated people because the vaccinated people are supposed to be safe from the disease. But that misses a key point. Unvaccinated people still need to socially distance from other unvaccinated people. Either way, all of this goes back to trust in institutions. If Fox Corporate thinks the risks of the vaccine outweigh the benefits, well, this is a free country. They're entitled to their opinion. And thanks to the First Amendment, their news side is free to share that opinion. But to behave one way and urge your viewers to behave a different way betrays an unholy contempt that is unforgivable. And if Fox News disagrees with Fox Corporate's policy, but they aren't using their platform to crusade against it, we have to ask, why not? I'm not saying Fox needs to become a cheerleader for vaccination rates, but to have a system where your own workers have what is essentially a vaccine passport, while your coverage is weighted so heavily in the other direction, is cowardly and disgraceful. Like I said, it's understandable for a new vaccine to get rigorous coverage by the media. It should. Pfizer is a for-profit company. We shouldn't automatically assume that they want to give every American a third booster shot because they're just following the science. But that's just it. People who want to sort through this stuff need a media they can trust. If Fox is telling you one thing and doing something different with their own employees, how can anybody trust them? So, Emily, what do you think of the fact that Fox has created a Fox Clear Pass? This is Fox Corporate.
Right. I take the exact opposite take of you on this, in that I think Tucker would tell you he thinks that that's hypocritical too, right?
Right, but he knows that this exists. Like, I'm sure he got the emails too.
And I'm sure he pushed back on it internally. I mean, I'm not speaking out of school, but I mean, if you watch Tucker's show,
right,
I'm sure he's going after that internally. But that aside, I actually think what's interesting is you have a major corporation, Fox Corp, that is requiring this, and yet they still allow the friction on their network, people who are going against the narrative and the grain. I'm vaccinated. I think it's probably safe. I think people should do it. But I also think there are, as you laid out in the first half of your monologue, this is experimental. There are, clear pros and cons when you're looking at when you're weighing the things with COVID is new, the novel coronavirus, novel coronavirus vaccine. But I think also the fact that this major corporation is one of the few corporations in media, period, to allow narratives that cut against or to allow criticisms against the official capital N narrative, I actually think is pretty great. And that's sort of how I come down on the opposite side of it.
I just wish I didn't have to be the one to report this. We should hear from Fox directly.
I agree with that.
Here is what our corporate policy is.
Yeah.
Here's where we agree with it. Here's where we disagree with it. And Fox did actually put together a PSA. Do we have that? Do we have that sound that we can run? Fox did put out a PSA saying we're all in this together. Let's play that.
We've been through a lot,
and we're getting through it together.
It was a challenge unprecedented.
And so many rose to the occasion.
Now, with the end in sight, we hope,
we have to keep up the fight.
Wear a mask, distance where possible,
and if you can, get the vaccine.
America, we're in this together.
Well, okay.
I mean, I don't want them to become like any other corporation that won't even let you talk about like ivermectin. And I think that's actually probably a rule on pretty much every other network. And Fox lets its opinion hosts get away with cutting against the grain of the capital N narrative. And I still think that's a net benefit. I do agree with you. I mean, come out and talk about the passports. Let your own people report on it. Let Tucker report it out. That would actually be really interesting. I don't disagree at all on that. What is also kind of this, I love that you started the radar with a question of public trust, because if you go back and watch MSNBC, you could probably have found, while Donald Trump was president and the vaccine was in development, them casting doubt and skepticism on the vaccine.
Fauci himself.
Yes.
It's like there's no way we'll get a vaccine within a year. That's absurd. It's impossible.
Right, and that's why people are vaccine skeptics and hesitant, because both sides were they're flip-flopped. And it's hard to blame the average American for being a little bit like, do I want to inject this into my body? Again, I'm vaccinated. I think it's the right thing to do. But I also appreciate that there's at least one major media corporation that allows heterodox views on the capital N narrative.
I wish it would be balanced out with people who can smartly and with sophistication talk about both sides of the argument. Like bringing a cardiologist on to like contradict himself in his own answer. It's only 60 to 70% effective, and there's no reason to take it. Well, you just gave us a reason to take it. You just said 60%. And also, he just said out loud, it's ineffective against Delta. That's not true. Like that's like nobody believes it. Like no, that's false. Like there are breakthrough cases, but if there's a breakthrough case, it's going to be less severe if you've been vaccinated. Now, are there complications? Are there side effects? Absolutely, and those should be explored. But we need to do it in a place where we trust that both sides are being presented fairly. That's my only argument.
Yeah, early in the pandemic, I think this was earlier mid-March of 2020, I wrote a column that I had no idea would serve me for like these conversations over the next like year and a half about how facing a pandemic in this era of cratering public trust is going to be an enormous can of worms that we can't really even understand. And I think that's obviously panned out. Anybody could have predicted that, but it's amazing sort of to see the way that has unfolded with things like the vaccine itself. It's just a good example of how poorly equipped we are to litigate science and facts in the mainstream media, right? The legacy media is incredibly ill-equipped to have these conversations, and it does such a disservice, I think, to the public. But then, what's the solution to that? I mean, it's not like cable news is ever going to be a really great forum to have these conversations. So I guess just have to nudge people towards sources they can trust, but those sources have to be built up to begin with.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
All right. Looking forward to your radar. Up next.